Hey everyone, what's up? I wanted to remake this video because I realized that I didn't really go through a lot of stuff that I wanted to get to, and I didn't really explain some of this stuff, so maybe you guys will find this a little extra helpful. So let's get in with the cake. So here's the cake without anything on it. As you can see, that's the untouched sample, and once I found that sample, all I did was change the volume inside so that this part right here was completely silent, so it wouldn't click when the other kick would start. And so yeah, so the first thing I do, I put on an equalizer, and so one of the first things when you do that is to boost the bass of your kick. As you can see, boosting the bass a couple dBs gives it more boost. And you want to do that because when you boost the bass, it's going to give your kick a lot more energy. It's going to give your track a lot more energy. And most of the volume of your track is going to be that 50 to 150 range. And it's what's going to give your track all of the energies. So that's going to be your kick and your sub, which I'm going to get to later. So once I did that, I dropped at 110 because the next frequency was at 110, and I want to get rid of it to give my really bassy frequencies more room to breathe. And it's subtle, but it's effective. And then the last things were to give it more high end, and that's just going to bring out the transient, which is this part right here of the kick. Is going to make it more clicky, more punchy. It's going to feel more like a slap. So once I was done with this EQ, I moved on to another EQ, and this one was just to add on to the other one. And first thing I did, I gave it some more bass still. And now it's really rolling that bass. Alright, next thing I did, still give it a little more attack. And I didn't really like the frequency around 180, 190, 380, 390, so I got rid of it. And this part right here made the kick sound not as round, more flat, and so I wanted to correct that. So that's a pretty drastic change for a kick. 5 dBs and with a curve that not steep. It's pretty drastic and gets the job done, and it cleaned up a lot of those nasty frequencies I didn't like about that kick. So that's the EQs. Next thing is the envelope shaper. That's a plugin that Cubase has, and basically it's what it sounds like, and it gives it more attack because I could have used a compressor to achieve that effect, but compressors can get messy, and I have more control with this, and you'll hear it once I stop bypassing it. Way more punch. Next plugin, I use the bass lane, which is a free plugin from Tone Projects. It's really great, and I could have used the R bass, which is right here, and this is what it looks like. But the problem with the R bass is that it takes a lot of frequencies away, especially the top frequencies. So that's why I like to keep it for my sub bass, which you will see in a second. But for the bass lane, you basically choose the frequency you want to boost. You choose how much you want to boost it, and the width, stereo spreading that you want that frequency to be at. You can give it some gain, and you'll just hear it. And that's a really good driving kick. And I recently added a bit crusher, and that's a trick that D. Conahan taught me, and it's just a really low sample divider, and all it does, it gives it um, more highs, so it basically sounds like I layered a hi-hat over it, even though I didn't. And so, here you go. And that's how I did my kick. Alright, next I did the sub bass, and the sub bass it's a silent, it's not a preset, I made it myself. It's fairly simple, just simple saw. They're all in the same octave. Yeah, so 8 voices, that's just for the volume. I added another oscillator because the way silent is routed inside. It makes it have more attack and almost more bass. And then I layered a couple sine waves over that to give it more of that subby feel. Attack and decay, they're pretty standard. Attack at 0. I do have some decay because otherwise it's going to make it click. You can hear that. Now it's clicking. Let me try to get it back. Oh well. Alright, so that's how I did the sub bass. Okay, yeah. Then I added some drive to it because Silent's drive, if you put it at 9 o'clock, it gives it a massive volume boost and gives it a really warm feel. And the key to this basic sound is the modulation envelopes. You want to get it right, and so I just routed the cutoff to this envelope to give it that plucky feel. And then I gave it some EQ, and that was just taking the highs away that I didn't like, and boosting the bass at 124 Hertz. The next thing I did, I put on an equalizer, and all that was, well, first I took off the high frequencies I didn't want. Then I boosted the very low frequencies for the energy and the drive again. And then I took off that second incoming frequency, and then again, that's just to give the sub more room to breathe right here. And I did the same thing at 305, but that was because there was a nasty resonance in there, and I wanted to get rid of it, so here goes. after dealing with the EQ, the first thing I do when I have a sub, I put on the R-Bass plugin, and that amazing plugin. Here's what it sounds like, and you basically choose the frequency you want, and you mess around with the settings. There's 3 knobs. Can't really go wrong. You'll find what sounds good. As you can hear, massive boost on the low end. I then added a compressor. That compressor was just a volume knob. I just wanted to boost the volume because on my fader, the volume, I didn't want to boost it. Yeah, I didn't have much headroom on my fader. So, because I don't want to make it clip inside silence, so I had to make it kind of low on there. So that's just to give it more volume. And this EQ is just to get rid of any frequencies that could interfere with that one and that we can't even hear as humans. So simple processing on the sub. Once you're done with your kick and your sub, you always want to make sure they're both in mono. And there's this great plugin called the Stereo Tool from Reflux, I think, and Flux. And it's a graphic analyzer that'll show you if your stuff is in mono or stereo. So as you can see, it's a straight line. It's completely mono, which means I'm good to go. Alright, next thing I move on to usually is my drums. So the drums for this track are a little bit different. What I did, I made 1, 2, 3, 4 loops. I made this loop. I made a percussion loop. I made a hi-hat loop. And finally, I made a last groovy loop. And all together, they sound pretty good. If I had to kick in. So I went a little bit extreme with those because I literally put on single hits in there, and I equalized all of them. And so the main thing to take away from all these things is take off the bottom end on everything that's not kick or sub. As you can see, on everything I always take out those frequencies. Then I went on to the claps. I layered 5 of them. And so we begin with this one and that one. They're 2 short claps. They're both panned on the right, and that's just to give it more attack. And then I have 3 longer claps layered together. And they all have compressors or envelope shapers to give them more more punch, more attack. They're all equalized. Some of them have a boost in the high. They're all a little bit panned. This one's panned to the left. This one's centered because it's the main one, I think. Yeah. Yeah. And so then I group them to the collapse bus, which has a compressor. And the trick with compressing drums, give them a little bit of attack so that there's a little moment of loudness before it starts compressing, and that will just give your drums more punch, more attack. Don't go too overboard with the ratio or the threshold. It just makes it sound over compressed if you do. And yeah, just basic EQ, basic boost in the highs, give it all that brightness, all that nice clappy frequencies, I guess. And yeah, so that's for the claps. Next, the hi-hats. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layered hi-hats. Here's the first one. And that's a really good trick, is to layer some type of ride. And if you look, the ride used to be much, much longer, and I just made it shorter to fit the hi-hats. And rides have an insane amount of high frequencies, and you can see that in the equalizer. And I did some corrections right here. I didn't like this frequency. All together, they sound like this. They're not really panned. I think I did that right here. Yeah, I grouped them in their hi-hats group. I panned them slightly to the right, and because I panned the claps so much, I didn't want the hi-hats to take the attention away from the claps that were already panned. So hi-hats, equalizer, basic stuff, take out the bottom end, always, always, and boost the highs. And then I put on a compressor, same deal, little bit of attack. Nice compressed sound. Then the envelope shaper, and I use that on the kick, and I'm using it on the hi-hat. Even more punch, and then this plugin is great. It has this high frequency adjust thing, which is amazing, and gives it a lot of nice high frequency, and also nicely adds some really good distortion to it. Makes it sound that much better. And all together, sounds pretty nice. Next thing is the mid bass. So for this one, I started with this mid bass right here, and it's actually a very simple sound, even if it doesn't sound like it. And I went crazy with the processing on this mid bass, and you'll hear it. So let me bypass all those things, and let me play you the rouse sound. I added a basic compressor and some EQ. The EQ is just giving it more treble, taking off the bass, because it's a mid bass, I don't want the sub frequencies. Added some distortion, clip distortion, and that makes it a little bit fatter. And the trick to this mid bass is that it's only two voices of a saw, and they're detuned and the stereo is to the max. And what that does, it gives you a very, very wide sound. And the trick also is the phaser. And phaser usually they move, but if you put the rate to 0 and the gain to 0, you can use it as a sound shaping tool almost. You'll hear that when it's not turning on. Almost sounds like I'm making it pass through a some sort of guitar cabinet type of thing. So next thing, equalizing, taking off the bottom end and making some adjustments. Next, magneto, we went through this one. Gives it a really nice saturation. Then I use the waves one knob louder to give it more volume, and it's kind of a more subtle sound goodizer if you use Fruity Loops, you know. Here's what it sounds like. Then just another EQ, doing some minor adjustments, making it less muddy. That region right here is where stuff gets muddy. And boosted the highs again. And finally, that's actually meant to be a mastering plugin, but I used it to basically give it more air, make it more clear, and compress it. Gives this mid bass a really nice gritty sound, and here's what it sounds like with the sub and the kick. Really wide. And okay, so let's move on to the second mid bass. Also, this one was weird sound. Oops. Here's what it sounded like at first. Put some decimating distortion. Okay, yeah, no, so the trick with this mid bass is to have everything on retrigger so that it's going to be in mono, but also it's going to respond very well to distortion. You'll hear once I turn on everything. So first thing, some equalizer, taking out the bass, boosting the treble, and then some distortion. And that sound, once I turn on all these, is going to sound very well because it's meant for distortion. EQ, I then again cut the low end. I actually boosted that area right here. It sounded good, so I did that, and I boosted the highs. I added a magneto on there. Oh yeah, so that's a really, really cool trick. You take a stereo delay plugin, you put the feedback to 0, you put the delay to 0 on one side and the delay to like 9 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds on the other side. And it's basically double tracking, if you know what that is, and it's going to make it sound really wide. So if you have stuff that's in mono, you can make it sound wider like that. And then I added some distortion. And yeah, I didn't want to boost it because it sounds nasty, but just having the feedback and the tone and a little bit of spatial makes it a really nice sound. And finally, I added a bit crusher for more high end. Very subtle. Yeah, so this sound, it's not meant to be one of the most forefront sound in the mid bass, but it has its place. The next mid bass, because these two together they sounded good, but they didn't sound full. So I needed another mid bass, and that's a really simple sound. You put a square wave 1 octave lower than a saw wave with a little bit of detuned, a little bit of voices, and yeah, here's what it sounded like at first. Not a very interesting sound. I added some EQ and some distortion. Still, not the best sound. So, I did some EQ changes and cut off the low end, cut off the high end, and I didn't like those frequencies right here, I guess. I used the one knob louder again, and magneto. And then I added on another EQ to get rid of those bassy frequencies. And I used the stereo enhancer plugin that comes with Cubase to give it more width. And finally, I put on a bit crusher to give it more character. Let me turn it on. And so that's how I did the 3 mid basses. The trick to this one is to have the first MIDI note of each 3-note sequence to be significantly shorter than the other twos. And so altogether, they sound like that. That's the mid bass, added the sub, and the kick. And the drums. And that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have any suggestions, just leave a comment.